Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the, I guess, the second session of the day. Today we are going to talk about technological innovation and smart integrated systems. So we have ahead of us a fascinating mix of presentations. This is obviously a very broad topic, but we have a great panel with a really good broad experience on the topic. So we're going to hear from Enerdata, who will be looking at some of the key innovative technologies that we can expect over the horizon and that we should be getting ready for. UNIDO will be telling us a little bit about their work to identify and fund scaling of emerging technologies, which is always a difficult space, with some good examples so we can anchor that ambition into reality. We then have Lucitia Group, who will be speaking alongside Green Grids Initiative, looking at some of the specific barriers and technologies on HVDC supply chains, particularly related to the ASEAN power grid, which is a very hot topic at the moment and something ADB particularly is looking to try and get behind. And then lastly, from one of my ADB colleagues, we'll be hearing a little bit about the use of AI to assess and manage project risks through assessment of contextual risk intelligence, or CRI. So maybe I can just introduce the panel, and then we'll have the presentations after that. So we have Guillaume Requin, who is a Senior Project Manager at the Clean Tech Unit at Enerdata. We have Gada Ahmed from UNIDO Project. She's a UNIDO Project Coordinator, and she's the lead on critical minerals. And alongside her, we also have from UNIDO Peter Warren, who is the A2D Facility Manager. So we'll be hearing a bit more about the AD2 facility later. Then we have Max Gwynn, who is a co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer at Lucitia, and a Senior Advisor and Supply Chains Lead at GGI, at the Green Grids Initiative. And then lastly, we have my colleague from ADB, Syed Jahangir Ali, who is a Safeguard Specialist at OSFG from here at ADB. So maybe a round of applause for the panel before we start. So maybe I can kick off by introducing and asking Guillaume to come to the stage, and we'll be hearing today on the Modelling the Future of ASEAN Grids, Innovative Technologies for Enhanced System Efficiency. Thank you.
All right, it's working. So good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be the first speaker and to be able to present to such a distinguished audience. Just a quick word of introduction. So today, my presentation will explore grid enhancing technologies, what we call GETS, and more specifically, the potential for ASEAN grids. So just before I start, a quick word of introduction about Enerdata. So we are an independent energy research and consulting company. We were created in 1991, and we specialize in energy and climate modeling, energy statistics, and market intelligence. We do it through recognized sectoral databases and proprietary forecasting models that we have been developing since a few years now. We are headquartered in France, in Grenoble, but we have one office in Singapore, from where we maintain a strong presence in the ASEAN region, and we work both for public and private institutions. So I'll start with a brief word of context about the grid challenge in ASEAN. Then I'll introduce grid enhancing technologies, so what they are, potential benefits for the ASEAN region, and where the region stands today. After that, I'll introduce the key results of a modeling exercise we did for Vietnam, and that illustrates potential capacity gains of such technologies. And I'll conclude with a few bottlenecks and recommendations for the scaling up in the region. So as you may know, ASEAN's power systems are facing a triple challenge. Electricity demand is expected to double by 2050. And to meet this increasing demand, the different countries will need to invest heavily in their power capacity here in the region. and especially in renewable capacity. And so we expect between 1 to 3 terawatts of total renewable capacity in 2050 in the region, depending on the scenarios and the organizations. If we only look at the short term, and so especially the total additional capacities by 2030 that are targeted by the main economies here in the region, we reach a total of plus 210 gigawatts, including 140 gigawatts of renewables. So the challenge is simple. The grids will need to integrate more electricity and more renewables, while of course maintaining and improving the grid stability. And so, as you know, countries such as Myanmar or Cambodia still face regular power outages. This is where grid enhancing technologies come into play. They are, I can say, one of the key solutions to manage these problems as part of broader strategies to tackle these issues. Maybe first, what they are. Briefly speaking, they are a group of software, hardware, and system-level tools that can help unlocking more power capacity on a grid by doing different things, better managing congestion, for example, or enabling more more power to flow through transmission lines. The most mature of these technologies are advanced conductors. So you may have heard about high-temperature, low-sag conductors. The principle is quite simple. Basically, they replace the traditional steel cores by composite cores that enable them to operate at higher temperature and carry more power. They are still in the early scaling phase in the region. We have assumed that they represent approximately 1 to 2% of the total power grid infrastructure in countries such as Vietnam or Indonesia or here in the Philippines. Other example of GETS is dynamic line rating. Here again, the approach is quite simple. So you dynamically adjust transmission lines by using real-time weather data, so such as wind, for example, temperature. All these different parameters have an influence on the grid. These technologies are still in the pilot phase in the region as well, and there is no systemic integration but a few pilots in different countries. A third example is storage as transmission asset. So I guess you all know battery storage. Here the idea is to use battery storage at strategic nodes of the grid. So you deploy them strategically, and it helps to defer, replace transmission upgrades, or better manage congestion. It's emerging, such as a DLR. There are a few notable large-scale deployments, especially here in the Philippines. And we have seen a few pilot initiatives as well in Vietnam or Indonesia. These are not the only technologies, only grid enhancing technologies. So there are a lot of different technologies. So I won't go into the detail of demand response solutions, for example, or advanced metering, but there are a lot of them. From a policy perspective, what we can say here in the region is that the different countries do integrate these technologies into their policies. However, if we look at from an operational perspective, we can say that they are still in their infancy. If we discuss about Singapore, for example, so Singapore is kind of the most advanced country in terms of digital technologies on the grid. At the moment, they have a strategy which is called Smart Grid 2.0 that includes the development of advanced smart grid, especially digital twins. If we look at Vietnam, Vietnam is interesting as well. They have set ambitious targets. So that includes, for example, development of BESS capacities, plus 20 gigawatts by 2035. And they have launched a lot of different pilots as well. Indonesia has taken a rather different approach. So they've been focusing on smart meter solutions these last years and deploying a lot of these solutions within households, just to give you a few examples. So maybe I'll try to make it a bit more concrete now with a modeling exercise that we did for Vietnam, and that really illustrates how these technologies can unlock additional power capacity. We have built 3 different scenarios looking toward 2035. And each of these different scenarios reflect a different level of penetration of these technologies on the Vietnamese grid. We have only focused on 2 technologies, DLR and advanced conductors, which are, I can say, the most mature today. And we have built so these 3 different scenarios. using a methodology which was used in a similar study, which was done in Europe, and really taking into account the targets of the Vietnamese government. So if you look at PDP-8, which is the strategy of the government, they target the installation of new transmission lines and reconductoring of existing lines. So the first scenario is assuming that these technologies are widespread on the network. So it's a kind of optimistic scenario. You can see it on the left. There is a medium scenario, which is really policy aligned. And so we have really taken into account the different statements of the Vietnamese government and the different strategies. And the third scenario, which is a bit more conservative, you could say more realistic in a way. But the idea is really to focus these technologies on strategic transmission lines in the country and really to have a strategic approach. The key takeaway here is that even through a strategic approach, so if we look at the conservative scenario, it already unlocks a major power capacity gain. If we look at the conservative scenario, GETS can unlock approximately 15% of capacity gain, really via these targeted upgrades, compared to a baseline scenario where no GETS would have been implemented. If we look at the policy aligned scenario, then it rises to 30% gains compared to the baseline. And if we look only at reconductoring project, so meaning that we modernize existing transmission lines and we put advanced grids, and if we do it only for the 500 kilovolt transmission lines, then it unlocks a significant 9 gigawatts of additional power capacity. Just to give you an idea, this is the power capacity which is needed to fill all the data centers in the region by 2035. So, and you're doing this without requiring new rights of way. So it's quite significant in terms of potential gains. We have not assessed core benefits such as job creation, investment efficiency, or emissions reduction, but they're real. I'll conclude the presentation with a few bottlenecks and recommendations. So I would say, briefly speaking, that the problem today is not technical or technological, it's more practical. So capital is an issue as well, as always, especially that these technologies often require some OPEX incentives that needs to be put into place compared to traditional grids. So there is a need for blended finance here. A second aspect that I see is that a lot of these technologies are really relevant within the framework of the ASEAN power grid. However, to be implemented at that scale, they would need to harmonize grid codes, data protocols, etc., etc. And for this, you need more coordination between the ASEAN member states. And maybe to conclude, even though these technologies are from a technical point of view are really mature, they still embed some technicity. And so that required some capacity building to DSOs, TSOs that are not always familiar with the benefits of such technologies. And especially it requires to work with large volume of data. And this is where capacity building can come into play. So I'll stop here. It was a bit dense. Thank you for your attention, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
No, thank you for that. I'll use this. Thank you for that presentation. Yeah, fascinating to see some of the gains that can be made by bringing in the new technologies. Some of those percentages were really impressive. I guess the problem is how to implement them at scale and on a financially viable basis, and what can be done to move that. So maybe we can explore that in the panel session. So next we have a joint presentation by Peter Warren and Gada Ahmed, who will be talking about demonstration as a catalyst, scaling emerging clean technologies for resilient energy systems. So I think Peter, you'll be starting, is that correct? And then handing over to Gada. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Anthony, and thanks very much to the ADB for inviting us to present in this really much needed and excited discussion on smart grids and interconnection as well. So thank you very much for that. So as Anthony said, Rada and I are going to do a bit of a double team. We're also going to show a video as well so that you can see one of our projects who are actually represented in the room today. If you have any questions, we can point them out to you so you can see how some of the high-level concepts that we're going to present go onto the ground as well in an actual impact story. So we'll show a quick video. But to start off, we do have a quick Mentimeter poll, which I hope is okay, just to get things a bit more lively. So I think on the next slide, it would be great if you could scan this QR code and put in which innovative digital solution will have the greatest impact on enhancing the resilience and security of energy systems in the next 5 years. So I'll give you 30 seconds to put in some words, and then we'll show the results. And while you're doing that, just to give a bit of background on who myself and Rada represent, which is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, which is the specialized UN agency for sustainable and inclusive industrial development in developing countries. So we're going to be presenting a particular initiative and program called the Accelerate to Demonstrate Facility, which provides grant support to smart energy technologies in developing countries, which is going to be the brunt of our presentation. I don't know if we get the results. Now, how do we get those up? That's the next question. I don't know if someone at the back in the tech room can get the results up. Okay, we got two responses. Some high participation rate there, I see. Just give a few more seconds. You can see it's going up 10, 11, 12 responses, 13. So we've got energy storage coming up quite a lot there, battery energy storage. So what we're going to aim our work towards now, following this. AI. So what we'll do is we'll let this run a bit more, and maybe at the very end of the session, we can, if Anthony allows us, we can quickly get it back up before we close the session to allow more responses as well. So maybe if we can go back to the slides, and we'll keep this going, and we can also try and come back to it a bit later. While we're switching, just to save a bit of time, we publish an annual report called the Industrial Development Report, and that had a good focus on smart technologies this year, and all the things that were in this slide just now are the sorts of things that were being discussed within this report. So the role of AI-enabled and smart energy management systems to connect grids better, technologies like digital twins and blockchain, for example, real-time management for smart grids, for off-grids, microgrids, and these are all topics that are coming out quite strongly, particularly on industrial decarbonization, so for manufacturing, for example. And it also deep dived into a few case studies, including in the Asia-Pacific region. I think just because of time, we probably won't go into too many case studies on that, but we do have one case that have a project that we're supporting that we'll probably spend a bit more time on. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rada for our next few slides.
I will go quickly through the slides. So this slide presents the importance of accelerating a demonstration project in smart energy that will reduce emission needed for climate action and the climate target. Yeah, also to fill the gap related to funding needed globally by 2026 to achieve environmental goals and the climate goals. So the market also here in Asia Pacific is strong. There is strong support for developing countries to achieve development goals, but still needed 23 billion. Also market assessment developed by UNIDO assessed 50 technologists, innovation technologists, and it was found that the most categories, largest categories from smart grid and also cross-cutting technology, and 50% of assessed countries are still, their technologies are still in early stage or pilot stage. Here, this is another case study from Thailand and India, and they are advancing continued reduction in renewable energy cost and enhancing accessibility. The more mature the technology, the less risk we have, and also the high impact we have. Here, the A2D facility is a part of UNIDO to accelerate the commercialization of clean energy technology, and smart energy is part of it, and it is funded. The facility is funded by the UK government. The size of grant is around 1 to 5 million. We are a global program support developing countries, and we are currently have 9 projects, and the third call is open. So I will hand over to Peter for the second call.
And yeah, just a couple quick slides. We have an open call for proposals at the moment, so if anyone's interested, then we can share the slides afterwards. We're going to show a video in a second, which is for our last 2 minutes of our presentation. But just a quick introduction to that project. And as I said, we have 2 representatives in the room here who deliver that project in Nepal, so we can introduce you afterwards. It's a smart energy project looking to integrate battery energy storage and solar PV to decarbonize the steel industry in Nepal with fantastic scalability potential. So really excited about this project, but I'll let the video do the talking. So if we go to play the video, I think if the guys at the back in the tech room can play the video, that would be great. Suspense. You have to give us an extra minute then.
Imagine a future where Nepal's industries power themselves with clean, reliable energy instead of polluting diesel generators. This isn't just a vision, it's happening now. Welcome to Grid Resilience through Intelligent Photovoltaic and Storage Phase 2, Nepal's industrial energy revolution. Building on the success of GRIPS 1, Practical Action, Calm Power, and Swan Barton, with support from UNIDO's Accelerate to Demonstrate facility, is taking clean energy innovation to scale.
Welcome to Lakshmi Steel Limited. This is one of the largest steel factories in Nepal, and in this project, we'll be demonstrating industrial-level decarbonization of diesel through the installation of a 1 megawatt solar, along with a 2 megawatt, 4 megawatt hour battery bank. This installation will lead to 1,000 kiloliters of diesel displacement, along with 2,800 tons of CO2 displacement over the tenure of the project. This project can demonstrate how industries in Nepal can increase the reliability of their power and also decrease their energy costs by choosing renewable energy and by displacing diesel generator in their operations.
At Swan Barton, we specialise in smart energy systems. And through GRIPS 2, we're revolutionising industrial energy in Nepal. Our AI-driven technology is changing how Lakshmi Steel stores and uses their energy. Traditional backup systems waste energy and drive up costs. Swan Barton's machine learning algorithms forecast generation and demand and balance loads in real time, minimising inefficiencies without diesel reliance. That means fewer emissions, lower costs, and smarter energy consumption. It's more than just storage. It's a blueprint for energy resilience and industrial decarbonisation across Nepal and beyond.
Great, so that's just a snapshot of one of 9 projects that we're currently supporting in the A2D facility, and happy to chat more about it afterwards. The timer's just started flashing red, so that means I'm out of time, but just very quickly, I have one final slide, which is just to say we have a number of other initiatives that are looking at different parts of the smart energy integration piece, including a global alliance on AI for manufacturing and decarbonisation, and a few other programs that are looking at how we support on the planning side of smart technologies, as well as what we do more on the implementation and construction and operation side. So with that, I'll finish, because I know we hit our 9 minutes, but thanks everyone. Thanks.
No, thank you very much from our colleagues in UNIDA. It's always good to see concrete examples of how the technologies are being rolled out. So next we have a colleague from, excuse me. We had a late replacement, so my documents aren't fully up to date. We have Max Gwynn to join us next. So as mentioned, Max is from Lucitia and also Green Grids Initiative. So today Max will be talking about wiring resilience, unlocking HVDC supply chains for regional interconnection, which is a very, very hot topic at the moment. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to walk you through some of the key findings from our Asia Pacific high voltage transmission supply chain project. And just at the outset, I'd like to say it's really great to see Guillaume's presentation, and you'll really see from this some of the more practical implications about adopting new technologies around grid enhancing technologies. So just quickly to introduce ourselves, GGI is a global network which was launched at COP26. We're focused on accelerating grid development and facilitating the green energy transition. We bring together governments, industry, finance and multilaterals to coordinate action on the biggest barriers to grids rollout. So when we look at the global HVDC supply chain landscape, what do we see? Well, 4 key things to take away. The first, both global and regional demand has grown markedly in recent years for key technologies, and today we're going to be focusing on particularly 525 kV XLPE cables. These are now doing the grunt work of long-distance subsea interconnections. Secondly, the technology has really shifted in recent years. Previously, we used to rely on mass impregnated cables in the 525 kV category. That's now been subsumed in the last 5 to 10 years by XLPE. They represent potentially like 50% capacity gains, which now makes a whole different class of projects viable. I note that Europe actually adopted this as their base standard in 2023. So this is a very kind of new and emerging technology, even though, you know, often when we talk about technology adoption, we tend to kind of focus on the more cutting edge things like AI. Things like cables are really critical. So third, global supply is incredibly constrained. European TSOs were the first movers here. It's a really interesting story in that they essentially all got together and said, we are going to put a huge amount of capital up front to buy pooled purchase in this technology, which was at that point completely untested. That provided the capital for the OEMs to establish new manufacturing facilities. However, as a result of that, global supply is now disproportionately taken up by these European TSOs, with wait times on these cables somewhere between 5 and 8 years. And the final thing to kind of really get across is that accessing manufacturing slots is one of the critical hurdles to making a project bankable. You can't get finance unless you can prove supply of components. Getting a reservation slot sometimes runs in the tens of millions of dollars, so getting finance for those early reservation slots is incredibly difficult. You kind of get caught in this chicken and egg problem. So if you think about some of the implications for ASEAN, I'll be quick here because I think that the points were well made in Guillaume's presentation, but they currently have about 2.8 gigawatts of true grid-to-grid capacity. 7 of the 18 outstanding APG projects need submarine cables, and that represents about 15 gigawatts of new capacity that is needed. When you look at the projects that have progressed to date, they tend to be very short distance and in older AC technologies. So, what have we done in the project so far? We launched this at Singapore International Energy Week last year. We brought together a representative sample of OEMs, financiers, development finance, and industry to ask them why is investment not flowing into new supply. After that roundtable, we did a year-long process of engaging these stakeholders bilaterally. We had another roundtable last month to confirm our findings and develop potential interventions. And now this week, we're launching our report, this fetching little guy right here, which I encourage you all to download and read. So let me jump into some of the key findings. The key finding here is that manufacturers won't expand capacity without firm demand. Developers won't commit to projects without offtake certainty. Governments won't lock in commitments without cross-border alignment and de-risking in place. And financiers won't deploy capital without clear risk allocation. Everyone's acting individually rationally, but the system remains stuck. So let me put some detail on that. If you look at the OEM side, they need aggregated demand before they'll invest in new capacity. An idle plant, because of the total capex up front, burns between 40 and 50 million US dollars a year if it's idle. So that's just not an option from their side. That means that they need about 5,000 kilometers of dedicated demand to establish new operations. Developers need long-term offtake signals before reserving manufacturing slots. And when you think about these projects, it can sometimes be a decade between concept to operation. If you're someone who's providing these offtake arrangements, you don't want to be signing contracts 10 years before you might have to pay them out. So it creates this gap between making the commercial model. If you look at the banks, they want transparent permitting, stable licensing terms, and clear trading frameworks. And I think the other thing that came out that was really interesting throughout this process was that system planners, if you think about how they have operated for the last 135 years, they operate on two principles: price sensitivity and reliability. That makes them sort of uniquely disincentivized to adopt new technologies, right? So when you look at some of the specs for projects in the region, they tend to rely on older proven technologies with lower upfront costs. So system planners need incentives and political cover to adopt new technologies. So when we're looking at some of the key levers that might address this problem into the future, the first is regulatory certainty. We need to codify a subsea framework, including clear permitting standards, establishing single coordination points, and setting commercial standards, including offtake and export licensing. I will note here that the ASEAN energy ministers have made some great strides in recent months. They're moving forward with a new subsea cable framework. The policy and regulatory component of that is well underway, and the governance and technical component has just kicked off, I believe, this month. Second, we need to look at demand aggregation. So how do we move from a project-by-project approach to visible, pooled regional demand that gives manufacturers the confidence to expand supply? Third, early-stage risk sharing. How do MDB-backed mechanisms such as guarantees for surveys and slot reservations lower the risk environment for all players? And then lastly, standardization. How do we apply existing international standards consistently and adopt modern HVDC tech like 525 kV XLPE to reduce bespoke engineering? So as a result of these findings, we've developed 13 potential interventions that we're intending to workshop with our stakeholders. We don't need to jump into these in too much detail unless you want to ask questions later, but I think the relevant point here is that these things all stack on top of each other. Often when we were having this conversation a year ago, everyone tried to jump to the top of the pyramid here. How do you create new factories? It's not immediately clear that that's the solution. Whether we need factories or can expand supply in other ways is open for debate. What we really need to do is work up this intervention stack so that we can have a clear shared understanding of the challenge and then set the rules of the game that make these investments possible in the long term. The key kind of question for us is, what minimum combination can unlock delivery in the near term? this is a lot of work to do, and I think it's not reasonable to kind of expect the system to do all of this stuff at once. So how can we agree on which interventions are most high impact and move forward with those? So jumping into the next steps. The project was envisaged as a 24-month sprint, and it's really kind of trying to bring together all stakeholders in the system to work together and set aside the competitive concerns, which is a real challenge when we're looking at commercial entities, and move forward to concrete commitments at the end of this process. So we've now done the fact-finding element. The next stage is we're establishing a task force that will try to break off and run targeted sprints around each of these potential intervention stacks. I will say that we are now seeking EOIs. If you would like to be part of this task force going forward, you can find our report on the GGI website, and there's also a form there to register your interest on that side. Once again, I'm just going to give one last little plug for our report. We encourage you to go to the website and download it and read it. And if you'd like to ask any questions, yeah, please find me after the presentation. Thank you.
As I stand up, the clock has just ticked over to 0, so that was exactly on time, which is very very unusual. So thank you. Some fascinating discussion there around how to move the large ambition of APG forward and where the blocks are. It's something that occupies a lot of ADB's focus because we talk to the governments, we talk to the developers, we talk to the suppliers, and a lot of the same issues have come out. So I'm really looking forward to building that out during the panel discussion. So in terms of our presentations, we have one left. So I'll hand over to my colleague, Syed, who will be talking a little bit about contextual risk intelligence for resilient clean energy systems in Asia. Thanks, Syed. Over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I think it's always good to start by introducing myself. My name is Syed Jahangir Ali. I work as a safeguard specialist in the Office of Safeguards over here, and I'm part of the policy team over there. So when I joined, my job was to actually establish the contextual risks within the ADB projects as well, which has brought me to this conversation as well. Okay. So I come from wearing a perspective of environmental, social, and governance side of things, which is what we call that's the ESG framework over here as well, and how do we, as an institute, work in this. I love the fact that I came in the end because all my colleagues and co-panelists over here talked about project level stuff. And I think my job is to give like a more macroeconomic or a macro perspective to it. And that's why I'm talking. When we talk about technology, innovation, and smart integrated system, few of the things that we do not think about are how we can integrate that into our policy and actions as well. And how we can harness the power of AI to integrate and channel in a way that we can actually establish fast, resilient, and robust dynamic systems as well. So for that, I will take you to the example of the current day Middle East crisis as well and how it has affected Asia and Pacific as well. But coming back to my slides as well, since I love Venn diagrams, I used to love mathematics as well. So one of the things is just like, it's a representation of like how things fall as well. So most of the time when we work in a darker area, the shaded area, which is where our project is, where we're putting in our funding, where we're doing our projects as well. However, we do not have a lot of leeway in the context that we are working. Imagine if there is a national disaster in a country, we cannot do anything, but have we given enough contingency planning to our projects to actually incorporate those changes which are happening? And what happens is when we're doing these projects, it's a two-way streak as well. We have moved beyond the point where we believe in trickle-down effect as well. What we believe in is actually engaging with the communities and how do we harness all of that. So when we do a project, we can actually affect the context as well, and the context can affect the people as well. And in order to harness that, how do we go about it? So now here's a picture of Strait of Hormuz. I thought it's always good to have a picture representation of what is happening in the world as well. And as you can see, There's one from February, and then there's one from April as well. And there's a marked difference in how things changed as well. But what does that really translate into Asia and Pacific as well, and especially energy security for us as well? It also means that 84% of the Middle East crude oil and energy transition came from Hormuz was Asia bound as well. In this part of the world, the crude oil prices barrel did go to $126 as well. Mind, these figures are actually a little outdated. I'm sure things have changed in the last week or the last 2 days as well. It also affected 50 plus gigawatts hour of energy as well because of this as well. And that's what really helps us in trying to establish the context as well. So how do we do that at ADB as well? And few of the things that we can actually all use and integrate into our system as well is like we ensure that there is governance and quality taken into consideration. There's social inclusion taken into consideration. There's labor supply issues as well, institution capacity. And one of the most important that we kind of tend to think as political risk is the geopolitical dynamics and how that can be affected as well. So AI does have an opportunity. There's a lot of data available online. There's a lot of data which is available at price as well from different vendors as well, where we can actually see how these changes can affect us as well. What are the human in the loop validation? How do we go about it to have a very responsible pillar as well from AI? And few of the things that we are doing in our own projects as well, not all of them, but some of that, the crux of it is we ensure that there's accountability and risk training as well. We are ensuring that there's human in the loop validation. There's data protection. There's certainly bias auditing and local data inclusion. We need to be ensured that we comb through the data, and we need to ensure that there is transparency happening. There are different and this is the example that I was talking about, the Strait of Hormuz and how things evolved over a timeline as well. Pardon the fact that it has a lot of text on it, but just so you know how it goes is from February till May, and it talks about how the energy price shocks have affected clean energy supply and investment and finance as well. Now, one would think it's ironic, there's a war happening because of oil-related stuff. How is this affecting clean energy as well? Now, that's what really actually leads to the dilemma, which is like, it shows that there is a huge need for it as well, and the supply chains have been broken as well, and those are getting affected. So in order for that to be address, we need to take these contextual risk factors into tool as well. Now, here's an example of how different countries have been affected by it. Pakistan and Bangladesh, there's been fiscal debt as well, schools have been closed. Developed economies like Japan and South Korea, there have been changes over there as well. As even Australia has been affected. Small island countries have definitely been affected because of this as well. They already face a lot of climate disasters as well. And it's really shaping up the entire Asian Pacific for us. Now, how do we can use the contextual risk index as an operational toolkit for us as well? First is to engage it at an early stage. Second is to have a proportionate mitigation designs, incorporate them into your project designs. Third is to have a digital safeguards in consideration and ensure that you take the people that you're really doing this for into consideration, which is the social aspect of it. It needs to be community resilient measures as well. There are 5 recommendations for different stakeholders, how they can be involved as a role of an MDBs, as ADB, as the regulatory framework people, the developers, the utility of it. This will all be given to you, and I'll kind of try to reserve some time for the question and answers as well. But this will actually help kind of bring me back to the, I think almost a decade ago, one of the things that used to hear in the development sector was act local and think global. I think we've moved beyond that, and we should be maybe acting local, but impacting on a global level as well. And how do we can harness this is through having like incorporating AI and the use of it into making fast, dynamic solutions with the changing scenarios as well. As you have seen in the examples of the Strait of Hormuz, how we can actually address these as well. So I'll leave it to that, and thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our formal presentations. We have now about 25 minutes for a panel discussion. And that'll be really good to drill down into some of those themes that were presented just now. And afterwards, we'll have some Q&A. We'll have 10 minutes of Q&A. So please, as I mentioned, if you have comments or questions you want to ask, please tap them into the WOVA app and or just prepare them, and we'll have the microphones here so you can stand up afterwards if anything comes up during the discussions. I think I'd like to pass to the panel a little bit about the supply constraints around new technologies coming in for the APG, because that was a bit of a theme that came through a number of the presentations, and there was some really interesting breakdowns of the supply and the technologies being provided for the ASEAN power grid. We had presentations this morning in another sector, and some of the developers were actually saying from their perspective there is no supply constraint, because they see the forward pipeline of projects. They see the APG roll out 5, 10, 15 years, but they don't see the immediate projects in front of them which they can actually put orders in for. So we do have there's a disconnect, I think, as we were talking about, that the actual projects are still early days, and we're seeing that from ADB's perspective. We're being asked to do a lot of early stage planning, early stage feasibility study work. I guess the question is, what are the key barriers? If you could dive in a little bit deeper into getting that first or that next round of projects from the utilities for their planning decisions, so that once they make their planning decisions, they go out to market, then the developers can commit, and then you'll probably see the rolling out of the orders, the manufacturing. You'll see a little bit more action in this space, and then delivery of the technology to make that happen. So maybe if I can start with Max on that, because he had you were talking in some detail about that.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I think that's exactly right. I think when people look at the sort of headline figure of a 5 to 8 year wait for some of these components, they assume there are projects languishing, waiting. In ASEAN, particularly when it comes to these cross-border interconnectors, that's not the case by and large. A lot of these projects are still years off from getting to the bankable stage where you would do the reservation slot. I guess the kind of question is, though, in 5 to 8 years, do we want to be waiting 5 to 8 years? So a lot of this work has to happen simultaneously. And I think, really starting to think through on a global scale, like thinking both locally and globally, what does this industry look like in 30 years? What does it look like in 50 years when a lot of these initial projects have to be replaced? How do we actually forecast this demand and make sure that these problems can be solved into the future? I think also when we start to think about the other big theme of the conference this week in resiliency, what kind of premium does the world want to place on this resiliency? If we're operating, from a supply perspective of being like just in time, just enough capacity, what happens when one of these regions or, plants goes down at a critical time if we're integrating this as a fundamental technology for grids in the future? I think the other kind of theme here that we need to think through a little bit is that, there's been a lot of talk from, around the energy crisis and wanting to diversify away from fossil fuels because of the risk. But also the kind of reality we need to think about is, like with the APG, is you're becoming reliant in different other ways. It's like, who do you want your partners to be? Who do you want to think this through? And how, what sort of risk premium does the world or the global system want to put on making sure that these projects can continue to be move forward in the future? I think to your sort of central part of your question, though, what do we need to do in the near term? One thing I think very clearly is what ASEAN energy ministers are doing right now. Move forward with the subsea framework, create standards, create a clear policy and regulatory framework that allows, some investment certainty. And then I think the next bit is get one of these things built at scale, one of the really long distance things. Create a blueprint that can be followed. I think, you know, the reality is we'll need some sort of pilot program or support, particularly from concessional finance, to adopt this new technology. And one of the big things I've been thinking about recently, you know, in partnership with some of the colleagues at the bank, is what do those financing mechanisms look like? I think there's some obvious ones on the project side, including like reservation slot guarantees, but I also think there's a really strong place in technology adoption for things like policy-based loans. Can we start to set targets for certain technologies where we think that there's a real value there to sort of incentivize adoption and lower that risk for system planners to put this into their plans?
Yeah, let's open up the policy side, because another thing that came out this morning was policy before cables. I think a lot of the developers are actually responding to the calls for expressions of interest, and